I don't know how many of you are into cosmology, but I am. I find it fascinating.
I, too, find it fascinating that one can be a young Earth creationist, pretending as if the universe is only 6,000 years old, and yet marveling at celestial objects that are often millions of light years away. Cosmology is a study that, more than any other, shows how insignificant and peripheral our tiny planet is on the cosmic scale. It is laughable to remember how the Bible mistook our puny world for the first and biggest thing in the universe, imagining that it took God 3 days to craft this one small planet all by itself, but then on the fourth day, he simultaneously sneezed out 11 jillion galaxies all at once, with trillions of other planets and such. Like that wasn't even a thing. Oh, wait. The biblical authors didn't know about galaxies, did they? They said that God made the sun and the moon as if they are somehow comparable in size. And then as an afterthought, we hear the line that, oh, and he made the stars also, as if the stars are just glitter flung against the sticky dome of the firmament. And then God spends another couple of days finishing this one puny planet, as if the Earth really is the biggest and most important thing anywhere in the cosmos. The biblical authors didn't even know that the sun was itself a star, and that all those other stars are suns, many with planets of their own. No, the people who wrote the Bible obviously had no idea about cosmology, a study which directly and profoundly contradicts young Earth creationism.
Let me tell you something interesting most people don't know. There's some star clusters that we can see today that have been known about for thousands of years. Back to ancient Greeks, they knew about things like Pleiades, the star cluster Pleiades. They knew about Orion's belt back then. They knew about Arcturus, which is the brightest star in the sky. Okay? Now, to the naked eye, you look up at these things and they're just fixed. You don't even know that they move. We didn't, until we had the Hubble telescope and James Webb telescope, we didn't even know that there was actually a course that the stars followed, even though in Scripture it says the stars follow their course.
As we explained in the previous episode of this series, the stars were said to follow their course because, from our perspective on a spinning ball, the stars look like they're orbiting us in unison. And this illusion was doubtless one of the inspirations for the notion of the firmament, the fictitious glass dome that the biblical authors imagined to be above the earth. The Bible says in a few places that the stars were set in the expanse of this great dome. And the biblical authors said that the earth was fixed in one place such that it would not move. So maybe they imagined that the whole rhinestone dome rotated around the flat disc-shaped earth in unison. That's apparently what they meant by the stars moving in their course. Not each star following their own courses, but their course, singular, the one course that all the stars follow around the earth. The sun and the moon have a different course, and of course it was observed that the planets each had their own courses, but all of the stars had the same one, being apparently fixed in their positions in the fictitious firmament.
But here's what we've discovered now from the Hubble telescope and James Webb telescope. Pleiades, it turns out, is a gravitationally bound cluster. Pleiades is bound together gravitationally. Now this is now known, but it's not possible to know from the naked eye. James Webb has been able to confirm that because you can real close precision track the movement of stars now, okay, that you can't see from the naked eye. So Pleiades is gravitationally bound together. Orion's belt is actually loosening. That's now determined. Again, naked eye doesn't know that. You can measure with precision. You can see Orion's belt's loosening. Eventually it would spread apart. So Pleiades is gravitationally bound. Orion's belt is loosening. The third thing I want you to remember is this. Arcturus, the brightest star in the sky, Arcturus is considered a renegade star. It doesn't follow the path of the other stars. It turns out, in other words, it doesn't fall on the guided path. It's like an out-of-control, unguided star, is what they now know about Arcturus. But here's something that James Webb telescope discovered that's invisible to the naked eye. All you see is Arcturus up in the sky, but it turns out there are 52 little baby stars that follow Arcturus, like little babies following their mama duck or whatever. Okay, there are 52 little babies following the parent star of Arcturus. We now know that, but that's invisible to the naked eye. So I want you to remember these three things. Pleiades is bound together. We now know that gravitationally. Orion's belt is loosening. We now know that. Arcturus is this unguided, crazy star that now has a bunch of little baby stars following it. With that said, go home today and read Job chapter 38, 31, and 32. This was written 3,500 years ago.
Actually, no, but you're only off by about 1,000 years. Scholars of biblical history say that the book of Job was written between the 7th and 3rd centuries before our current calendar. So it's actually contemporaneous with Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching, the Hindu Bhagavad Gita, and the Avestas of Zarathustra.
Okay? God was rebuking Job. You know, poor Job, he's like, hey, God, why you let all this happen to me? And then God yells at him for 2.5 pages. Okay, you got to feel bad for Job a little bit. But when God is giving Job some what for, and he's telling him, are you God? Can you do this? Can you do this? Okay, I'm God, I can do this. Can you do this, Job? Remember when Job's getting at?
If God were real, and he really is a supreme being, and he spoke to people at all, then he should recognize teaching moments, like a wise and loving father figure would, like the role model dads of the TV sitcoms of the 1950s. But God can't do that in this story because he's trying to rationalize despicable behavior because he did all these shitty things to Job for no good reason, just to be a dick. And that's why Job's God talks like an abusive, drunken stepdad, berating Job so childishly, like a suspiciously insecure narcissist. Not at all like a real God would talk. And clearly, the God in this story is not that smart. Or maybe the author writing the lines wasn't very smart, and that's the best dialogue they could come up with, because these are not the things a real God would say. These are only things that someone pretending to be a God might say, if, as I said, they weren't very smart. Yahweh made a bet with Satan, as if God gambles or could gamble, being that he's omniscient. He's supposed to already know the end result of everything, but not in the Old Testament. The Hebrew God is not omniscient. He didn't gain that superpower until the human authors of the Christian revision redesigned that character. And this is the only time in the Bible when Satan ever did anything wrong, by the way. And that was only because God forced him to do it. And then in the end, God effectively used the excuse, well, the devil made me do it.
What does God say to him in Job 38, 31, and 32?
This is an example of two logical fallacies at once. In the first case, you're cherry picking, retrofitting these verses in a way that the ancients would not have understood it and the way the authors would not have written it. You're also guilty of confirmation bias by ignoring everything else this chapter says. If you want to make people make believe that the Bible contains future knowledge, then Job 38 is not the part that you should cite, because that book, and especially that chapter, have God saying some pretty stupid things that were popularly believed back then, but that anyone alive today would know better.
Remember, even if you're an atheist, this is something in recorded history from 3,500 years ago.
No, it's only 2,500 years ago, and it's not at all historical. It's a fable. None of that, not a bit of it, is real. That should be obvious because the dialogue in Job 38 is so indefensibly stupid that I once made a video just to make fun of that whole chapter. I'll put a link to that below and also play a clip from it too.
What is the way to the abode of light? And where does darkness reside? Can you take them to their places? Do you know the paths to their dwellings? Surely you know, for you were already born. You have lived so many years.
I'm a lot younger than you, but you are a lot younger than your believers imagine, since they imagined you and you cannot exist outside of their collective imagination. That's why you don't know anything more than your believers do, or rather, what little they did know thousands of years ago. For example, poor Job, if there was such a person, wasn't smart enough to know that darkness is not a thing that has a residence, and light doesn't have an abode either. Panpsychism isn't true, so quit anthropomorphizing everything. Darkness is merely the absence of light, and light is what happens when an atom releases photons as it changes energy states. So light can emerge from any atom in the universe, but it doesn't always come from any of them.
Have you entered the storehouses of the snow, or seen the storehouses of the hail, which I reserve for times of trouble, for days of war and battle?
How stupid are you? There are no such storehouses. You're not much of a god, are you? You don't even know about the hydrological cycle?
What is the way to the place where the lightning is dispersed, or the place where the east winds are scattered over the earth?
What idiot writes your dialogue? There is no location for either of these things. Lightning is due to a buildup of static charge caused by the movement of tiny ice crystals in storm clouds at high altitude. Wind is differential heating rates of land masses versus bodies of water, and this disparity causes changes in barometric pressure, which drives the wind. Both of these things can happen anywhere in the air, but the locations always vary, and not even you, not even God, can point to the place where either one always happens.
Who cuts a channel for the torrents of rain, and a path for the thunderstorm, to water a land where no one lives, an uninhabited desert, to satisfy a desolate wasteland, and make it sprout with grass?
No one does that because no one needs to. The rain cuts its own channels, and the winds that drive the storms can change also, thoughtlessly, according to dynamic conditions and pressure that I just described a moment ago.
Does the rain have a father?
No, and it doesn't have a creator either.
Who fathers the drops of dew?
Nobody. Warm air can be humid because the warmer it is, the more water it can hold. But when the air cools down again, then it can't hold as much, and the water condenses back out of the air to become dew.
From whose womb comes the ice?
I don't know, but I wouldn't want to meet her.
Who gives birth to the frost from the heavens, when the waters become hard as stone, when the surface of the deep is frozen?
No one. There is no womb for ice. Even Job would have known better than that. That ice is not something you give birth to. It's just frozen water. You get high enough in the atmosphere or far enough away from the equator, at the right time of year when it gets cold enough, and water will freeze.
Here's what he says. Can you bind Pleiades? Can you loosen Orion's belt? Can you guide Arcturus and her sons? Read it for yourself.
Oh, I did. Watch.
Can you bind the chains of Pleiades? Can you loosen Orion's belt? Can you bring forth the constellations in their season, or guide the bear with its cubs across the heavens?
None of the constellations you speak of really exist. They're only illusions of pareidolia, patterns that exist only in our minds when we look in that direction from our perspective here on the Earth. But if we could get close enough to any of the stars in Pleiades, Orion, Ursa Major, or Minor, those illusions would vanish long before we got there. And we would see that this star has no actual association with any of those other stars. Instead, from there, we would use our imaginations to connect the dots for the stars that we could see from there, to see things that aren't there, and imagine whole new constellations that, again, not real. They only exist in our minds.
Okay? How'd somebody come up with something like that 3,500 years ago?
Easy. Back then, the Pleiades were known as the Seven Sisters because they were always so closely associated that they were seen as bound together as a family. Orion's belt is just a constellation, an illusion of pareidolia, not a real thing. That's just what it looks like from the Earth. But if we were to move to another point in space, then the belt is not loosening. It was never connected in the first place. The Greeks saw a hunter wearing a belt, but the Chinese didn't see it that way. They refer to the belt as the three stars. But in either case, the connection between these stars isn't real. And as for Arcturus, as usual, Bob Dutko got that wrong too, like he did everything else in this whole series. It is not and never was that Arcturus was this wild rogue leading a line of babies behind it. It's just that Arcturus is the largest and most visible of a cluster of stars that are gravitationally bound and thus travel together. But the real answer here is not from astronomy, but astrology, as most translations reveal that this is not a reference to the star Arcturus, but to the constellation Ursa Major, the Great Bear, which is followed by three stars that are otherwise often interpreted as the bear's tail. The way human authors came up with this around the time of the Babylonian exile is because back when there was no TV and most people couldn't read, everyone knew about astrology.
Okay? These are the things that people don't know. I mean, the skeptic has got to realize the Bible is supernaturally inspired.
No, even reality-denying make-believers should realize how stupid this whole chapter is. It is obviously not supernaturally inspired. It's not inspired in any sense. This is low-budget paperback fiction at best.
There is no other religious book in the world that has these kinds of things about it.
Yes, of course there are. Mormons teach their kids about such things confirming the Book of Mormon, and Muslims have hundreds of apologetics just like these, but supposedly proving the Quran. Go tell a Muslim apologist that the Quran doesn't have exactly the same type of apologetics claims. You'll be in for a very long discussion where they will correct you on that until you finally realize that they have the same kind of excuses that you do, you have the same kind of excuses that they do, and that you're both full of shit. I've also read similar apologetics from the Bhagavad Gita too. I mean, Hindus have a lot of these type of apologetics. But when scientists first estimated the age of the Earth, which I think originally was at 4.32 billion years, Bhakti Hindus at the time crowed that the day of Brahma is 4,320,000,000 years, which is a number unlike anything you find in the scriptures of any other religions. So yeah, the Bible is just another supposedly holy book, obviously written by superstitious primitives who had no idea what they were talking about, who will make up any excuse and cherry pick any exception and ignore every contrary fact to argue for the infallible authority of their man-made mythology, where they made up what they decided would be the words not of the guys who wrote it, but of a God who never wrote anything. Seriously, Dutko, you've been demonstrably wrong on every single claim you've made, every attempted defense of your position. Is there anything that biblical creationism ever got right?
Nothing.